This is the overview of the first chapter. I wanted to talk about five items. The third subject is business ethics necessary? I want to talk there about a general debate in the area of ethics in business and try to show how ethics is, in some sense, necessarily connected to the practice of business. It doesn't matter, in other words, what kind of ethical view you have of the world, what sort of ethical theories you choose to adapt to your own experiences and so on. You can't escape doing ethics. Then Facebook and then avoidability of business ethics. This is kind of a case study in which we will talk about an episode involving Facebook and someone who lost their job. What I will be trying to show there is how the kinds of things that we're going to study in this class, the kinds of ethical concerns we're going to take up, how they're not limited to a professional or business environment. In fact, it's impossible to limit the study of ethics to simply what happens from 9 to 5. The kinds of decisions and the kinds of thinking that we produce on the job washes over to all parts of our experience. Then we will move on and give a quick overview of the textbook. The way it's divided up basically into 4 sort of general sections. I'll talk about where those divisions are and what each section is devoted to. Forging forward now. The question I want to ask here is the following. Is ethics necessary for business? There is some debate in some quarters. It's a receding debate. I think that it's less, there are less opponents of the idea of ethics of business than there were in the past. But there's still some discussion about whether or not business is a place where ethics belongs. To talk about that issue, I want to address what I'm calling two extreme views of the business world. One extreme view is that business needs ethical policing, let's say, because it's a dirty enterprise featuring people who get ahead by being selfish liars, right? Everyone in business is a bad person, therefore we need ethical policing to take care of what's going on out there with Goldman Sachs and in the big bad economic world. Another extreme view is that we don't need ethics at all because successful businesses will work to correct all kinds of errors or misbehavior through market forces. Right? Now, of course, one aspect of this view that makes good sense, right? Because in many cases that's true. Right? What most of us consider misbehavior is frequently cured by market forces. Companies that consistently lie about their products, right? That say, look, if you buy this water, then you will feel 100 times better, and you drink the water and you don't feel 100 times better. Right? Companies that continue to lie about their products tend to go out of business. However, as we saw in the case of the Love Canal, sometimes lying and abandoning, leaving trash and toxins in the soil, sometimes that does work in the economic world. Right? People make their money and leave. So it's not clear that the market forces are enough to regulate business. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But let's go to the first view. The idea that business is fundamentally a dirty activity finds quite a bit of support in the work of a man named Albert Carr. He wrote an essay called Is Business Bluffing Ethical? And the famous sentence is this. Carr says, look, in business, well, let me just read his sentence. Falsehood, he says, as lying, not telling the truth, falsehood ceases to be falsehood when it is understood on all sides that the truth is not expected to be spoken. An exact description of bluffing in poker, diplomacy, and business. All right. two ideas here. First, falsehood ceases to be falsehood, lying ceases to be lying, when it is understood on all sides that the truth is not expected to be spoken. Is that true? Is it true that if no one expects anyone to tell the truth, then lies are impossible? I'm saying, let's say that all of us understand that we don't expect other people to be telling the truth. Or we expect that other people will be lying. If all of us think that other people are going to be lying, kind of like in poker, then is it a lie? Oh, well, let's think about a poker game. Most of you guys supposed to have played poker, right? Or tried or watched someone play poker, that kind of thing. Has it ever happened when you're playing poker that someone stood up and accused someone else of being a liar? You expect them to be a liar, right? So my question to you is, okay, in poker, is it possible to be a liar? Right? In life it is, right? I mean, you can ask me, well, what's the temperature outside? And I can say, oh, it's 70 and sunny. I'm a liar, right? But in poker, if I say, I've got some good cards, am I lying? Is that a lie? Even if, assume it's not true, right? Assume I've got no cards. And I look around the house and say, oh, I got some good cards. Am I lying?
You're playing the game. Like, that's kind of the whole point of the game, is to deceive players. So if it's like kind of required, you do what you have to do.
All right. So she's saying the rules of the game mean it's not a lie, even though we all agree that I'm not telling the truth actively, right? All right. Uh-huh.
It's still lying, but that's the situation where it's actually socially accepted to lie. So people if you do lie, because that's part of the game. Just accepted that you lie.
All right, so there's two views we have now on the table. One view is because everyone thinks that everyone's lying is not a lie, right? The other one is we agree it is a lie, but we just accept it. Are there any other views? Do you have a third view? Or
So technically it's a lie, and no matter if you're playing the game or not, if you've already accepted the ramifications from the rules that people well, it still is a lie because you're not exactly telling the truth.
All right, so you come down more on her side, right? You say, well, it is a lie. People are lying. So falsehood does not cease to be falsehood. Lies do not cease to be lies. It's just that we accept that. Let me give you one more example. Think of a Hollywood movie like Spider-Man. Is that a lie? Spider-Man swings between buildings and shoots nets and does whatever he does. Is that a lie?
Fiction, like you said, fiction's already set up so that people know that it's not based on truth. So they can do all extreme things. It's accepted because it's known that it's not true.
But is it not, that's my question. Is it not true? Does anyone ever stand up in a theater? You've all seen a Spider-Man movie, right? Does anyone ever stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not true? When he swings from the building. Does anyone ever do that? So you think that you're coming down the side that it's not true, but I just accept it.
More like they're not telling you that, oh, this is true, you should believe that this is true. They're telling you practically, this is just a story, it's not true. So
Yes, yes. But the conceptual difference is repeating here. The one that we set up with the poker it's either that it is not a lie because everyone knows the line is expected, or it is a lie, but everyone accepts it. Right? That's in poker, and that's in movies. Any further thoughts? Yes.
It's almost like the difference between the two is like a magic trick where they're trying to tell you that it's like this isn't really happening. That is more a lie because they're presenting it as the truth. But when you're already in the context of it being fake, there's no reason to even question it because you know it's fake.
And because you don't question it, it can't be a lie. Right? It's neither true or a lie. I think that's your position, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the makers of the movie have proposed to know the truth. Any likeness to any person or individual is unintended.
Yeah.
Folks at the end.
What's being proposed here by Albert Carr is that whether it's a Hollywood movie or poker, his idea is that the entire distinction between truth and lies evaporates. It disappears. It's inexplicable, inapplicable, not inexplicable, inapplicable. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing when you're playing poker or watching a movie, right? So it's not that movies, his ideas, it's not that movies lie and we accept that. Instead, it is that in the realm of a movie theater, there is no such thing as truth and lies. It doesn't make sense to talk about truth and lies. Same thing with poker. His point is that when we sit down at the poker table, it's not that we say, all right, guys, all of us will agree that we can lie, right? No, it's not that. Instead, it is that when we sit down at the poker table, part of what happens is that the idea of truth and lies disappears. It doesn't apply to what's going on. It's what philosophers call a category mistake. It would be something like saying, well, but when people talk about the color of a wall, they say, well, it's red or it's blue. But no one ever says it is X squared. X squared, it doesn't have anything to do with the color of the wall. That's a math term, right? If you say the color of this wall is X squared, then you're making a category mistake. You're talking about math, not the color of the wall. Math has nothing to do with the color of a wall. The color of a wall is red or blue or white. Well, the same thing can be said about truth and lies in poker and in movies. You don't ask. It has nothing to do with poker. It has nothing to do with the movie. There are no truth. There are no lies. It doesn't exist. The idea evaporates. It's not there. All right? That's his idea about how poker works and diplomacy, he says. And now also, this is the important point, business. Is it true that business, next question, business is like poker? Assuming, again, that poker is, as he understands it, that is, it's a kind of field where bluffing is what you do. There is no truth or lies. That's his proposal. His proposal, business is like poker. Anyone think so? There are some ways in which it certainly is, maybe in every way. What are some ways in which business is like poker? I get involved in this. I make the mistake, because I'm a notoriously short-term person, I make the mistake of not signing long-term leases. So every year I have to go through the process again in which I tell the landlord, oh, I can't possibly pay $300 more. I barely could eat last night. I couldn't possibly pay that much. And she says to me, well, I mean, my car doesn't work anymore. If I can't get $1,000 more a month, I'm going to kick you out. So it's either $1,000 more a month or you're gone. I can't pay it. So we go back and forth, whining and complaining. And what do we do in the end? Well, even though I said I can't possibly pay more than $300, I can pay more than $300 a month extra. And I paid the extra. And even though she said I can't possibly go beneath $1,000, she does go beneath $1,000. And we find our medium range, say at $500 a month rental increase or whatever it is. Yeah. That's like poker, right? I mean, when we find our common ground, I don't say to her, you were lying to me when you said you couldn't come down. You could come down. I mean, we knew all along that's the way that was. So business is sometimes like poker. Question, is business always like poker? Anyone want to try and make that case? My question is it okay to bluff, to lie, to not tell the truth, to make that money? Normally in real life, right, we think lying is bad, right? I mean, if I tell my mom, oh, Mom, I haven't seen, I don't know what happened to your $20, but I really stole her $20. We would say that's bad, right? You don't do that to Mom. But what he is saying is that in business, bluffing, lying is acceptable. That's the way it's done. And it is sometimes. Anyone want to go all the way and make that argument? It's a hard argument to make. Anyone want to argue against that? Is there any part of business which is not like a poker game?
I would say you wouldn't want to be lying when you're doing your financial projections or doing those kinds of things. If you want to have all your information out on the table, like financial statements and stuff, to really see how your company's doing. Like, you have to be truthful in that sense. To be truthful to, say, if you have stock and to place it and the IPO, all that stuff, you don't really want to be lying. Is that what you mean?
Well, but if it was to your advantage, would it be okay if you lied?
No, because then you'd get in trouble by the government. So would you?
Well, part of the lie is you'd find a way to lie to the government too. That's the way you do it in poker, right? I mean, you bluff to the end, right? People call your bluff, and you say, "Well, I'll raise it even further," right? You bluff until you win, until everyone gives up and says, "Okay, you keep the money."
But you wouldn't win in the end. They would still get you for something. So you wouldn't really be like,
Well, in that case, then you shouldn't bluff, right? It's just like in poker. It's like in poker, you say, "Look, if I'm not going to be able to bluff this hand through, if I know like that guy right there, he's going to keep calling me until I've got to show my cards and I'm going to lose, well, I'm not going to start bluffing in the first place." So I think even then, it's still like poker, right? You bluff where you can get away with it. When you can't, you don't. But the point is, if it's like poker, if you bluff where you can get away with it, and when you can't, you don't, then the idea of truth and lies in business doesn't apply. It doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter if you tell the truth. It doesn't matter if you lie. All that matters is whether or not you can get away with it. Right? Whether or not you can win the pot in the end. You tell the truth when you have to. When you don't have to, you don't. Mm-hmm.
I think that in a way business is always like poker, because even if your company isn't publicly traded and you do give up like financial statements and like information you have to quarterly, there are still certain things like you wouldn't give up even in any business. Like you could have a daycare run from home, and you might have a certain way like you like to deal with your children, and you wouldn't make that, you wouldn't broadcast that, you wouldn't tell other people. While at the same time, if you had a multi-billion-dollar technology company, you wouldn't reveal, what software you're developing or what hardware.
But if I asked you, would you tell me? Or would you lie?
Well, I wouldn't lie, I just wouldn't tell you.
Okay, let me...
Which, I mean, you could argue that's the same thing because I'm being misleading or dishonest.
Mhm.
But we don't consider like that wrong. Like when Apple's making the iPhone 6, we won't expect them to tell us. But it's considered wrong if someone steals the information.
Well, when Apple makes... What iPhone are we on now? So presumably they're doing the 7. If people were trying to figure out what was on the iPhone 7 and Apple put out some fake sort of blueprints of the phone that really don't correspond with what the phone is that okay? That's bluffing, isn't it? But would it be okay, this kind of bluffing? Or would it be okay for Apple to say, look, we've got to... How about if they're in competition with Samsung and Apple says, and they want Samsung to rush a product to market, so they make an announcement, we're going to bring out the new iPhone 7 next week. They're not really going to do that, but they want to rush Samsung to market before they can get an campaign. Is that okay?
it's a business strategy.
It's a business strategy, right? But it's not true. It's a poker strategy. That's bluffing, right? All right, yeah.
Well, in some cases, it might seem so expensive. It's like when people want to buy more shares of stock in Apple, but it turns out that they don't have the phone's not coming out, or their stock are the same.
True. But the question in business is just like the question in poker, right? Okay? Well, we said in poker, and then we'll wrap this up. The question in poker is, well, people lie in poker. There are two ways of thinking about those lies. One way is to say, look, we all agree that since we're playing poker, lying is okay. Another way to think is, since we're playing poker, the entire idea of truth and lies doesn't apply. It doesn't make sense. It's not here. You're foolish if you talk about that in that way. Just like in a movie, you would be foolish if you stood up and yelled at the screen, wait a minute, that's not true. No one can do that. You would be a fool. You may make a fool of yourself. Right? Well, if you have that, if you bring that model over to business, you can make the case that it's not that you're allowed to lie in business. Instead, it's that the entire idea of telling the truth doesn't count there. It's not what you do. It makes no sense. What you do in business is just like I do with my landlady. I tell her I can pay $300 a month, but not a penny more. And then 2 minutes later, all right, $500. It's not that I was lying. It's not truth or lies. There's no truth or lies. Business is just people trying to get away, or trying to do what's best for themselves. Maybe. All right? That's one view of business. But it's also possible to say that business is not like poker. I mean, there's some obvious and simple ways we can say business is not like poker. One thing that happens in poker is everybody sits down at the table, right, and agrees we're playing poker. But business isn't like that. There's no point where we all sit down at the table and say, okay, we're doing business, right? When I just go to a store to buy a candy bar for $1, right, in a certain sense, I'm not sitting down at the table and saying, let's do some business stuff. No, you offer me a candy bar and I give you $1 and that's it. It's not really business, right? So therefore, it's not okay if you give me, I pay $1 for a candy bar and it turns out to be filled with chlorine or something. Right? So maybe business is not like poker, but maybe it is. I don't know. The point I want to make here at the end is that even if business is like poker, even if we agree that there's no such thing as truth or lies, and that in a sense, anything goes in business, you're still doing ethics because some value is still guiding you. What is the value that guides you if you think business is like poker? What is your ethical value?
Well, in some cases, you honestly are trying to help the person who's buying your product. If you're selling them on a product that you really believe will help them, you want to sell them to buy that however you can because you know in the long run it's going to help them out. Whereas in poker, if you're trying to bluff someone out, you're not looking forward to them winning in the end. You're looking after yourself only.
Right, but I would say, well, in this case, this would be, okay, I will just change the metaphor a little bit. Sometimes in poker, you intentionally lose a hand to try and get that other guy to bid up, and then hammer him at the end, right? Well, that's what you're doing with this case. Well, I give you a really good product for a low cost this time, again and again, so that overall, I develop you as a customer, and I know that you won't leave my company, and in the end, I will be the one who makes money, right? I'm not giving you a good product because I want you to be happy. I'm giving you a good product because I want to make money in the end. It's the same logic. I want to make money in the end. That's what matters. One strategy or a different strategy.
You can both win in that scenario, as opposed to poker.
Right.
There's hardly ever splitting a pot.
Exactly. Right. In your view of business, you can have win-win, right? Poker doesn't have win-win. Poker has I win and you lose, or vice versa, right? Yeah, so in that way, that's another way that business is not like poker, right? That's a good point. But there are some people who nonetheless insist, for the reasons we've talked about, the business is like poker. We're not going to decide that in this class. What I do want to say, because this is a class of business ethics, is that even if business is like poker, even if all we're doing out there in our professional lives is trying to get the pot, we're still doing ethics. We're still doing ethics because we're being driven and guided by a certain value. What is the value? Money, right? Money is a value like any other, right? You can say, well, what's most important for me? What I want is happiness. You can say, what's most important for me? What I want is freedom. You can say, well, what's most important for me? What I want is general social happiness, right? That's why I do volunteer work. And you can say, what's most important for me? My guiding value is money. That's an ethics. Right and wrong is about money, and what's right is getting the most of it, and what's wrong is not getting as much as I could. That's poker. That could be a version of business, but regardless, it's definitely ethics. It's a way of doing ethics. It's a way of setting up values and arranging your life around those values. All right. And then the same point, what I wanted to get to is the same point here. There are some people who say that, many people say that, look, the way that a marketplace should work, it's not like a poker game. Instead, the way the marketplace should work is we should just step back and let problems be resolved by the forces of supply and demand, right? So, someone might say it's wrong for, look at this now. Spring, what is this, Poland Spring? Poland Spring puts a little wrapper on their water with nice trees and a blue lake, implying that their water, and a mountain, implying that their water comes from a mountain stream with trees. Does it really? I'll have to look, but I bet it doesn't. I bet it's just water out of the tap and then cleaned by a filter, right? This is a lie. Do I care? Not really. But, or just assume it's a lie. Maybe it's not. Let's assume it's a lie. But if companies do consistently lie to me in ways that are important, then I'll stop buying their product, right? So the idea of the marketplace is that the marketplace takes care of problems. I want to say that this also is an ethics. What is the ethics of the marketplace? How can we convert the idea that the marketplace takes care of all of its own problems into an ethics? What value drives that? I would say that's the value of individual freedom and responsibility. The idea that's what's highest, what's most important, is that we give individuals acting in the world maximum freedom and maximum responsibility for their actions. People take care of themselves. That's what we should seek to do. That's what we should seek to have. Right? And if we let that happen, then the world will take care of itself. That leads to the conclusion that really no matter how you conceive of business, in one way or another, you're going to be doing ethics. The point I want to make, the reason I'm doing all this is the following. Ethics in business is not something you can choose or not choose to do. It's something you have to do. You can't go to work in the morning. You can't do things in this life if you don't have something you want. If you haven't set up some kind of value, something you're pursuing, something that's important in your life. Without that, you'll just stay in bed. If nothing's important to you, if you don't want anything, if you don't care about anything, there's no reason to get out of bed in the morning. If you get out of the bed in the morning, it's because you want something. And wanting something is doing ethics. Right? Therefore, business ethics is inevitable. Right? This is the point I want to make. No matter what happens, anytime you go into your profession, begin your morning at work, right, you will be doing ethics. Even if you're like the guy who thinks of business as a poker game. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about not just how ethics is always in business, it's also true that business ethics is in life. Right? Here is a case study about how business ethics enters life.
Complaining about the boss on Facebook changed a woman's life.
Yeah, she was fired for it.
Sousa's problem started when the ambulance she worked on picked up a 17. That's code for a psychiatric case. This particular 17, as it happened, wasn't too crazy to form and submit a complaint about the treatment received from Sousa. Since this was the second grievance the ambulance service had received on Sousa in only 10 days, she sensed that she'd be getting a suspension. Looks like, she wrote on her Facebook page later that day, "I'm getting some time off. Love how the company allows a 17 to be a supervisor." She also referred to her real supervisor with some choice four-letter words. A number of co-workers responded to her post with their own supportive and agreeing comments. Management responded by firing her. The termination decision came easily to the ambulance service, since their policy explicitly prohibited employees from identifying or discussing the company or other employees in the uncontrolled public forum that is the internet. Around the water cooler, at home, or during weekend parties, people can say what they like. Given the semi-permanent record that is the web, however, and the ambulance service's natural inclination to protect its public image, posting there was out of bounds. But, Sousa responded, "There's no difference. If people can talk at the water cooler and parties, why can't they post on Facebook?" She's not claiming to speak for the company, she's just venting with a keypad instead of vocal cords.
I do have a freedom of speech, and that is my right, that is everybody's right here. And that was what was being tested.
The celebrity blogger and Facebook addict Perez Hilton came down on the company's side. "We think Dawn Marie should be fired, and we support the company's decision to let her go. When you post things online, it's out there for the public to see, and it's a sign of disloyalty and disrespect to deal with a work-related grievance in such a manner." Regardless, the Sousa episode displays many of the ways business ethics connects with our non-working existence, whether we like it or not.
All right. There are some questions, but we'll start by making up our own. What is, let's get a list of 3 ethical dilemmas here. 3 ethical dilemmas. There are at least 3 ethical dilemmas in this case. What are they? Or what are some of them? Yes.
Well, she argued a violation of the rights.
Okay. So what is the dilemma? What? Okay.
So the dilemma would be, I guess, like she feels like, well, her rights were violated and that's against the law, so I guess that's the dilemma. I don't really know how to put it in words. It just, I don't know. Help me out.
What is the conflict? On the one side, we have her saying that she can say whatever she wants, whenever she wants, right? Let's say that. What's on the other side? Who or what is against that?
Well, the company's against it because their policy states if you have a problem with the company, you don't post it online because that's released to the public and it ruins the image of the company and it's disrespectful.
Okay, that's a lot of arguments actually. So it's free speech versus. Okay, let's say that. Let's say versus fidelity in the company policy. Company policy saying no internet, no Facebook posting. What's another conflict? There's a lot of free speech versus conflicts. Free speech of the individual versus
Loyalty?
I think that kind of wraps up with this, but we might be able to see that as a distinct thing. For example, if my free speech was, this medical service is great, I love them, all the managers are excellent, and the service is first rate, I'm probably not going to get fired, or it's not going to cause a problem with the company image. How about,
What about in like her personal life, like versus like her corporate life? Because like she on her personal face.
I think that's a good, right? This personal life versus professional life. Or another conflict is one between free speech, right? She's free to say what she wants, and the freedom of the owner of the ambulance service, right? Just like I may be free to say whatever I want, so too isn't the owner of the ambulance service free to hire or fire whoever they want? So it's free speech versus what should we call that? Free management? All right, let's choose one. Free speech versus fidelity, free speech versus loyalty, free speech versus free management, or private life versus professional life. Why don't we do free speech versus free management? Anyone want to make the case that, assuming that's the ethical issue. The ethical issue is very simple. We agree that people have a right to free speech. We agree that management has a right to freely hire and fire. Anyone want to make the case that Miss, what was her name? Souza, right, should not be fired because well, I'll let you go either way. Either she shouldn't be fired because free speech is more important, or she should be fired because free management is more important. Mm-hmm.
I think that, well, in management's case, that they fired her not for the sole reason that she posted on Facebook, but maybe because she did get a second complaint within 10 days, and maybe management feels that they could get an employee that would do a more efficient job.
Yeah, that might be, but within the way I'm presenting the case, I'm trying to say that what it comes down to really is she called the manager an SOB, and the manager said, "You're fired." That's it. Let's just get rid of all the other stuff.
I mean, she wasn't obligated to say anything on Facebook, so she did it herself. She does have that free speech to say whatever she wants.
Pushed it over the edge.
So which side do you come down on? Do you come down the side that it was free speech and she should not have been fired, or no, it was perfectly right for them to fire her because
They should have fired her, but not just because she did. Well, for the complaints too, I feel that they could get a better employee who's militant, but at the same time, you can't just go around calling them that.
ethics is difficult. This takes us back to this question about. Remember, I said that when we talk about ethics, we need to have values, facts, and arguments. In this case, I'm doing facts. I'm constraining or limiting the facts. I'm saying the only facts that exist here are she called the manager a son of a bitch, the manager fired her. That's it. Those are the only facts in play, right? More or less. Yeah.
So she has her freedom of speech to say whatever she wants, but there's also, I think, a way for her to air her grievances publicly without saying, like, this specific manager is a son of a bitch. And so since she said this specific person, that's kind of a personal attack. So I think the management said, I feel offended and I feel attacked, so I think him reflected.
That makes sense. So you can say, well, look, we can reconcile this. We can say, look, she can have her freedom of speech, and they can have their freedom to fire whoever they want. All she needs to do is just not cite the manager by name, or just whine and complain as much as she wants, but not on Facebook where everyone in the world can see it, right? So in that way, you could say, look, we can protect both freedoms. That would be a good way to resolve this case. It's not the only way. There are different ways. But one way to resolve this case is say, look, we buy the freedom argument. We're going to maintain both freedoms, and there's a way to do that, right? As long as she just doesn't post on Facebook, just like the company policy says, she's free to say whatever she wants. And they're free to hire whoever they want, and everyone is happy. We only have the conflict when her free speech gets out of control. Huh? Yeah.
Going off of what she said, that management, they made their policy and they have the right to fire. Like, she knew the policy when she signed with the company. Like, most of the time you have to sign like an agreement. And management said, well, we have this policy and you broke it under our eyes, so they have the right to fire her if they thought she broke that contract. That management had the right to fire her. Kind of like what Sammy said, like, she could say what she wanted, like, she can say what she wants, but she violated what management. That's kind of the...
Right, so you're moving up to this argument and saying, look, here's a way to formalize the move she just made. She says, look, we have a conflict between two freedoms here, all right? One way to adjudicate this is to say, let's imagine there's a balance here, but when we look at other ethical considerations, when we look at the free speech versus fidelity, it's quite clear that she broke her contract. And that clarity tilts the balance against her and in favor of the company, right? So there are two ways we're developing to look at this argument. One is we can stay within the freedom question and say she should have been fired because she could have kept her free speech without talking to Facebook, or we can start to look outside the situation, this direct freedom situation, and look at other considerations like fidelity and say, well, because she signed this contract, even though the freedom might balance out, she signed the contract, so for that reason she goes. Right? Yeah, and then we'll move on.
I think within this freedom argument specifically, I think going into it there isn't really a balance. Like, she should have recognized from the very start that the management has most, if not all, of the power in this situation because they're the boss. They're in charge of what...
They have the power, but do they get more freedom for that reason?
Well...
But she signed away.
They might, right? I mean, they might get more freedom for that reason. They say, well, she signed a waiver, and therefore they get more freedom.
But within the workplace,
that's the deal.
It's different. It's not. She's not being governed like under her free speech specifically. She's being governed with her free speech, but with an added amendment or whatever of the boss saying, "Yeah, you have free speech, but not with these terms or whatever." I think going into
right, but she was at home. Remember, she was at home at her house.
Yeah, but she's still, that doesn't make her no longer an employee. She's always an employee as long as she's working for the company. If she's on the bankroll, then she's an employee.
Good question. Good point. Let's go with that just for a second. Is that true? You're always an employee? I go home tonight and at 9:30 a.m., am I still an employee of Pace University?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you're one of the people who specifically project an image of Pace University as one of the people who instruct all of the students and, guide your students in such a way as Pace expects you to. So if you were to go home tonight and, post something negative about Pace and they see that, then as someone who's always supposed to be an example in guiding his students, they would find that as,
All right. let's change the example a little bit, okay? I actually live in the neighborhood. So imagine that by day I am a professor, but by night I'm not sure what bars the kids go to. You guys go to. I probably could figure it out. By night, I dress up in just an absurd attire, get wildly drunk, climb up on tables, throw glasses, and am a complete nuisance, right? Does Pace have a right to fire me for that? I'm not saying anything bad about Pace. I'm just dressing in cowboy clothes and boots and throwing bottles against the wall every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Does Pace have a right to fire me for that? Yeah.
Probably not, unless you kind of like said something about Pace or came to Pace and did something.
So I can do whatever I want as long as I don't talk about Pace, even though I'm an employee. Okay, well, why that? Why if I go to jail? Why am I fired then?
Because that would probably not be okay with food management things. It's probably not.
Right, but I would say, well, I don't care if it's okay with you or not. Look, you pay me to teach philosophy classes. I come in here, I teach philosophy classes. I do it. I come on time. I give the course, etc. I have never said a bad word about Pace. It's true that my behavior in the bars at night is somewhat suspicious, but that has nothing to do with you, right? That is not of your business. Why should I be subject to being fired for that kind of behavior? Only if, you would have to make, I think what you would have to say is, well, look, when you sign a contract to work, it really is 24/7. And that's the deal in today's world, right? Everything you do, everything you say reflects upon your employers, part of a contract, is part of what's understood of employees today. You can make that argument, but you would have to make that argument, and you have to support that argument. You have to be able to say, how can you insist that I'm always working for Pace even though I'm not being paid at 3 a.m.?
While you were out then you wouldn't really be a good role model for the students at Pace that you teach. If you were like, after class I go out, but when you want to do drugs, it wouldn't be a good thing to have a professor doing that when you go to class and he's not.
I think that's a little strong. I think that's a little stronger argument, right? You can draw a connection and say, even if it's a loose connection between my behavior and my professional ability, because yes, I'm going to walk into a classroom and some students are going to see me and they're going, oh my God, it's that guy, right? Yes.
Yeah, how you conduct yourself is a representation of the company you work for. So, with Paula Dean getting fired for using racial slurs in the past, even outside, she didn't say anything bad about the network, but the way she conducted herself put a negative light on her, and so wherever she works, she takes that negative image with, and so even though she has the free speech on the governmental level, she doesn't have it with the company that she signed a contract with.
Okay, so what it sounds like what we're saying is that free speech is getting there are other ways of looking at it, but one way to look at it is the free speech gets limited by employment when that speech relates in any way to, or those free actions relate in any way to your professional responsibilities, right? So it's not just if I say something bad about my boss is an SOB. It's also if I'm acting crazy in the bars and future students are in the bars, or if I'm saying things that racial stereotypes and I'm appearing on TV, et cetera, that kind of thing. It affects negatively my employer. So, conclusion, freedom is not absolute. It is limited within the business world when free acts reflect negatively on your professional ability, right? Or on what you contribute to the employer. You can make that case, right? That's a fair case to make. All right. The point I'm trying to make generally with this case is what I'm trying to do is show how cases for business ethics like these splash over into everyday life, right? That is, it's almost impossible to keep business ethics separated from life ethics. Right? What happens in business ethics is also part of life ethics, which I think is part of the value of the course. That is, the kinds of things you learn in this course apply to all aspects of your life. Now, up to now, we have been just talking about what ethics is in some broad sense. We've been locating ethics in terms of its historical development and in terms of how it's different from other ways of making decisions. And we've looked at ethics as something that is about determining values. I want to quickly give an overview of the entire textbook. I would like to show how the textbook is fitted together as a set of chapters and how it develops. And then, as I say, or as I noted earlier, the class development more or less is just going to follow the textbook development. So that will serve as a kind of broad overview to what we will be doing. More or less, there are 4 sections to the textbook. The first is chapters 2, 3, and 4. These are the theories we'll be studying this semester. As I've tentatively noted in the past, well, I'll come to that in a second. The second section involves employees' ethics. These are the kinds of a selection of ethical issues that tend to arise for employees in their day-to-day life. The third section of the textbook deals with managers' ethics. These are a selection of issues that tend to arise for managers. And then finally, in management sort of situations. And then finally, there are the general issues. These are questions surrounding business and economic life generally. They have to do with things like how should wealth be distributed in society, what kinds of responsibilities do corporations have besides making money, if any, and questions like that. Right? So, textbook is set up this way. We'll move through it more or less in order. Let me get to a little more specific discussion of the theories. What we're doing in Chapter 2, theories of duties and rights. The next chapter we will talk about consequences. And then this Chapter 4, we're going to leave this for later. Right? What's important about Chapter 4, responding to the challenge of cultural relativism, this will be the notion that in a certain sense there is no such thing as right and wrong. Not in a certain sense. It is, in a strong sense, it is impossible to find a firm definition of what an individual ought to do in any particular case. If we accept that, right, if we accept there's no such thing as right and wrong, well then how can we make decisions? That will be the discussion in Chapter 4. In the section on employees' ethics, the ideas we will be discussing are first, we will talk in ethical terms about how individuals make decisions about what kinds of careers are worth having, what kinds of jobs are worth pursuing. How do we decide what kind of work we ought to want to do? Chapter 6 is about ethical issues arising in the process of getting especially in the process of getting a job. One of the strongest issues there is, well, can I stretch my CV? Is it okay to lie to get a job? Is it okay to exaggerate to get a job? These kinds of issues. And then Chapter 7 is about day-to-day kinds of ethical issues that arise on the job. I'm thinking of things like you are competing for a promotion with someone, with a co-worker. Do you sabotage that co-worker to get ahead? Why yes, why no? Managers' ethics, fairly straightforward, right? Many ethical issues, most ethical issues for managers revolve around questions of hiring, promoting, and firing workers. What kinds of rules should be instantiated for these kinds of activities, and how can they be managed in ways that are ethically justifiable? Then that's Chapter 8. Chapter 9 will look a little bit about this notion of a corporate culture. What is a corporate culture? What kinds of ethical values lie underneath one or another corporate culture, and how does one kind of corporation work in ethical terms as a culture? All right. Then we'll move on to the general issues. Right, this is a good selection of the kinds of things that typically are studied in these kinds of classes. Discrimination, drugs, advertising and the powers of advertising, corporations' responsibility beyond making a profit, corporations' responsibility to the environment, and the distribution of wealth in a society.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is hard to define. Members come and go, meeting places and political strategies shift. The group's aims are both diverse and evolving. They're definitely an activist organization. In New York City, public parks have been occupied, bridges have been shut down, and streets overrun. This video captures a few scenes from the Occupy Wall Street March on May Day, 2012. It was a chaotic and varied scene, so it would be a mistake to see the video as anything more than a few snapshots of some of what happened. Still, the facts accumulated that early evening raise sharp ethical questions. The May Day March shut down Broadway in New York City, a major thoroughfare that people depend on to move around in traffic-choked Manhattan. While the march snaked down the street, cars and buses in the surrounding blocks inched forward, switched into reverse, experimented with new routes and, eventually, succumbed to gridlock. Leaving aside what's being protested, do protesters ever have the right to shut down public streets for their cause? What values and facts could justify the action?